Right, evening everyone. Before the official meeting starts, there's no members of the public present, so you all know the evacuation procedure as normal, and you know the rules about the filming of the meeting, only people who are sitting around the table, and please remember to use your microphone when speaking, and in case you wondered, new microphones are on their way at some point, but they're all working fine now, right, okay. So those are the kind of house notices. Do we have any apologies? I don't think we do. No, we don't have any apologies. As usual, any declarations of interest should be declared now or on the relevant item. Item 3 is the minutes of the meeting on the 14th of November. Can I sign those?
Agreed.
Public questions, I don't think we have any. No. So we're moving swiftly on. We have members' questions. Thank you to the two of you who gave us advance notice. Councillor Massey, is he here? Yes, he is, sorry. You're usually over there.
Thank you. Hiding in the corner, I'm small and easy to overlook.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you. And I have a second question, which I didn't have time to submit, but further to questions I've asked in previous years, I'm relieved to see on page 59 of the budget papers pack that the City Council appears to have identified a suitable location for a new crematorium at a lower cost than had been budgeted for. However, I have to question the projected cost on page 60 of 6.8 million for the crematorium development. Given the increase in low-cost, no-fuss cremations, the development of local commercial crematoria, and in this time of financial stringency, is this a service the City Council should be investing nearly £11 million of taxpayers' money into?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Massey. I'm happy to respond to this question as Cabinet Member for Greener and Safer Chelmsford, which means that bereavement services fall within my portfolio. The capital programme is not as restricted as the revenue budget, but of course we would only proceed if there was a sound business case. More importantly, why would we wish to take away an important local service, both for residents and their families, especially as it operates at no net cost to taxpayers, and there would be a reasonable payback on any investment made?
Thank you. I have a second question for Councillor Moore. And this is hot off the press because a number of residents have contacted me recently regarding the amount of litter along the stretch of the A132 between the Rettendon Turnpike and Southwood and Ferrers. While I don't expect Councillor Moore to respond immediately, I would be grateful if she would confirm and share the litter picking schedule for the A132 with the town's councillors and the town council. Thank you.
I'm very happy to do that, Councillor Massey. I'm sorry to hear of the littering, and I will respond to you after the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Steele had a question, but I think that's on the budget, so if it's okay, we'll take it then. Yeah, sure. Yeah, we'll take that as part of the budget discussion. Are there any other questions on other topics for which the Cabinet is responsible? No? Okay. So moving on then to item 6.1, Councillor Goldman, the annual council tax support.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the annual council tax support scheme. This comes to Cabinet every single year, which I'm sure those of you who've been here in the past will remember. I'd also like to point out that this is remarkably similar to the one that I presented last year and the year before that, for that matter, and the recommendations are essentially the same. Some of the numbers have been updated in the report, but it is essentially the same report. This is about discounts that we give on council tax to those who are in need. The paper sets out the details of the report, as this is a very similar report to that we've seen in previous years. I won't go into it in any detail, but I will repeat what I've said previously, and that is we, as much as we may wish to make this a more generous scheme, simply put, council's finances do not allow that to be possible, and it would be not something that we would consider, certainly it's not something that I think anybody should consider in this current economic climate to make it less generous than it is at the moment. People do need additional support. So I'm happy to take questions. Otherwise, I would move the recommendations as set out in the paper.
Yeah, Councillor Hyland.
Thank you, Chair. Having read the report, I wanted to understand if the council tax support scheme is planning to support more or less working age households than previous years. I don't know if you've got that immediately to hand, probably not, but if there is a sort of metric we can see, because I wanted just to understand how many working aged households are being supported versus the pensionable age being supported. If that's not data you got immediately, could you get it?
It does happen to be data that I have to my fingertips, Councillor Hyland. I'm sure you'll be delighted to hear. Your question is worded, if you don't mind me saying, a little bit strangely, because when you say how many working age households are you planning to support, that depends how many apply to the scheme. So it is a matter of them applying to the scheme, and then we see whether they fit within the criteria, and then they are judged eligible or not. And as the paper explains, at various levels depending on their level of need. But the numbers have changed over the years simply because of the numbers of people applying to the scheme and the numbers that are in need. Plus there is a slight quite a change actually, I would say, in the numbers in particular of pensioners that have been supported, and that we believe, it's very difficult to be very precise about this and to know exactly what is causing the changes, but what we believe is that the triple lock pension scheme has meant that has been able to keep pace with other costs, and so pensioners are able to deal with those with rises in costs more than working age people are, for example. And just to put that into kind of context, so in April 2013, for example, we had supported 5,121 working age people and 4,431 pensionable pension age people, which gave a, if my maths is correct, 9,552, which is happily written down in front of me. I don't actually have to do the maths. But this month now, the figures that we've got for January 2024, that's 4,085 working age people, whereas pensionable is 2,810. So that's quite a drop. So 4,431 down to 2,810 in pensionable, in pension age people who are eligible for the scheme. That is quite a change in 11 years. But as I said, that I think a lot is to do with economic circumstances as well. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, Councillor Thorpe, perhaps.
I'm sure this one is working. Hello, is this one working?
Yes.
It's flashing, isn't it?
I think it's working now. Yeah, thank you for the report. And I agree that expenditure on the scheme, as much as we would like to increase it, the council finances simply don't allow that at this time. My question is really just about paragraph 2.3. It says in there about there may be amendments required for pensioner and or working age households after any council decision as a result of changes to the council tax reduction scheme prescribed requirements, 2012. Just wondering how would that impact on the scheme actually, and would that actually impact on the expenditure? Could you perhaps just set out how that might amend it? Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe, thank you very much for your question. I don't have the answer to that today, but I would. I'm not sure if any calculations are available to that, but I will get those figures for you if they are available, and if not, an explanation, and send them to you after the meeting. That's okay.
Okay. Is that report approved?
Agreed.
Okay. Then moving on to the council tax premium report.
Me again, thank you, Chair. So this is, again, a remarkably familiar paper because it was agreed by Cabinet on the 14th of March 2023 and subsequently at full council on the 25th of July, where we are, so this is about council tax premiums that are levied in respect of empty properties once a property has been empty and unfurnished for 12 months, or if a property is empty, substantially furnished and nobody's main residence, otherwise known quite frequently as a second home, and whether we make those changes. To be clear, this was part of the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, which contained provisions to amend Section 11 of the LGFA 1992 to allow imposition of these premiums. It was still passing through Parliament when it came to Council previously, and that has now passed through Parliament, and I believe it's been given royal assent. Which now means that we have definite dates for this to come in. And so this is for Cabinet to agree to proceed on the basis set out in the paper, and I will take questions accordingly.
Councillor Thorpe, perhaps.
Thank you, Chair. My question relates to the second homes that are empty and substantially furnished, and it was really about the definition of empty, really. So if the property's empty for a year, we're saying that we charge a premium of 100% council tax. So supposing the owner moves back to that second home and he occupies it for, say, 2 months, does that stop the clock in terms of the year? How many days would he have to live back at the second property to effectively stop the clock? What's the definition of empty? I guess that officers will use discretion in this, but I just wonder if there's a steer in terms of what that actually is. Thank you.
Thank you. So I will again reply to you and make sure that I'm getting this answer correct, as it's possible that I may not cover everything in this, but it's just about the length of time that a property is empty. So, for example, we've got 0 to 3 months. As you said, does that if it was empty for a month and then somebody came back for a month and then, to be honest, I'm not 100% sure. So I will double check with the relevant officer and come back to you if that's okay.
Councillor Hyland.
Thank you, Chair. 1.4 of the paper suggests approval for additional exceptions to council tax premiums to be made by the Director for Connected Chelmsford. Can you outline how we get to the agreed local exceptions?
So there's, as outlined in the paper, there are various exemptions that are outlined in statute. So legal exemptions which come out in the report, but also there may be local exceptions. So, for example, where as it sets out in paragraph, I think it's 4.3 in the report, where we talk about local exceptions for where a planning condition, for example, may require the home to be empty, but we can't. So it would be unfair then, I think, to impose a premium on it. So I think that's what's meant by local exceptions, because there are obviously that might not apply around the entire country depending on local circumstances.
Thank you. So they're in the paper, as opposed to there's not going to be new ones made up that are exceptions that we're not aware of, right?
So the only one that I'm aware of at the moment is as set out in the paper.
Okay,
yeah.
Perfect. May I ask one more question, Chair? I know I'm pushing my luck. But what analysis can be provided for the underused accommodation in Chelmsford, and what success has this brought of bringing back into general residence use? That's at 5.1 in the report.
So I don't have those figures in front of me at the moment. Feel free to write to me at any point throughout the year, and also before the papers or as the papers are produced, and then I would have been able to bring those figures to Cabinet for specific questions. But I'm more than happy to come back to you and find out and provide you with those answers. Okay.
Okay, right. These are recommendations to Council, so is the report approved?
Agreed.
Okay. Right, moving on to item 7, Councillor Foster, the private rented sector offer policy.
Thank you, Chair. Is it on? Yeah. Is it on?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, good. Yeah. So I'm bringing this paper to Cabinet today. It's to provide a framework, as it says, to enable the council to end their main homelessness duty with an offer of accommodation in the private rented sector. We have been able to do this since the Localism Bill of 2011, but have never really had cause to do it. But now is the time. Now, and it is needs must. We haven't got the accommodation in Chelmsford, of utilising all of the RPs, you know, all of the registered providers' accommodation. And as you know, we've got this huge issue with temporary accommodation. Therefore, we are bringing to Cabinet to say we now need to be able to fulfil our duty by actually finding people accommodation in the private rented sector. What we anticipate is that this won't be, I don't think it'll be hundreds of people, but it will assist us. It keeps us legal. We've had it checked by council. It is legal to do this, and it's necessary that we have this, the revised policy to ensure that we are, that we are legal, that what we're doing is legal. But it will help us immeasurably, I think, for people who maybe want to move elsewhere. We know that some of our Ukrainian visitors didn't know anything about Chelmsford, may not necessarily want to remain in Chelmsford, but if they are homeless, they may wish to move elsewhere, and we can actually discharge our duty by finding them, or they can find accommodation where they want. And also, if you think about it, if somebody has been in temporary accommodation for a couple of years, somewhere out of Chelmsford, and their children are settled in school and they themselves are settled, then it makes sense for us to be able to discharge our duty by actually saying, well, here you go, you can actually stay there and we will discharge our duty. The policy shows that the officers are going to go through quite a complex set of, they're going to prioritise, and you can see the ABCD moving in ever widening circles around Chelmsford. But I think this is the only way forward, a good way forward, and I would recommend that we recommend to the council.
Any questions? Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think the first thing to say is the Conservative group broadly support this. We think it's a good idea, and I think it's a good time to bring it forward, as you said about the pressures. I was going to ask about how many people or how many families you think it might affect, but you did say in introduction you don't think it's going to be hundreds. You've got no firmer figure?
No, we haven't got a figure. I know that when officers have been talking about it, they're anxious to say this is not the panacea. This is not going to be, this is not going to solve all our problems. But for some people, it might. I'm quite happy to report back in a few months to see how many have been offered accommodation this way.
Okay, Councillor Hyland.
Thanks, Chair. It's unfortunate that we're having to consider this out-of-district private rented option, which I think is the message you just gave us there. I see the failure of the housing market to meet the needs of the residents here is at the root of the increase to our homeless duty obligations. Is this council able to adjust its policy direction needs here?
I think we would love to, is what I would say. It would be great to be able to build new council housing. I think our big issue is land, and the first one is land. The second one would be funding, and the third one would be speed. We've got this issue is now, and any development takes time. So we have to adopt other strategies to deal with the issue we've got now. And I would say that every single person is focused, those that have that in their sights, on producing more accommodation, like all the garage sites that Guinness are developing for us as we speak.
Okay. Yeah. Is that report agreed?
Agreed.
Right. Thank you. Moving on to Councillor Moore on the air quality management area.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to bring forward the paper this evening, which you have before you, outlining the potential to revoke the 2 air quality management areas that we currently have in Chelmsford. It follows the production of report for DEFRA regarding the air quality management areas in our city and district. And there are two options this evening. One is to revoke the air quality management areas as outlined, or the second is to retain them. Now, in Chelmsford, we have two areas have been of concern in the past. One is at the Army and Navy, and the second is at Malden Road in Danbury, which is a small section of the road, but nonetheless, levels of nitrogen dioxide had been considered higher than they should be. So the air quality strategy that we have also details these and provides more information for any members of the public who wish to understand a little more about the technical report that accompanies the Cabinet report that you've seen. We know that air pollution is of great concern, and it's a good news in that our levels are dropping to a sufficient standard over the last couple of years that we can consider revocation. However, air quality, poor air quality, still contributes to thousands of deaths per year, exacerbating underlying conditions such as asthma and COPD, and we should not underestimate the amount of work we still have to do. But I'm happy to say that as a local authority, we are responsible for monitoring and managing air quality in Chelmsford, and it's undertaken in accordance with our air quality monitoring plan, a copy of which can also be found on the Love Your Chelmsford website. So the recommendation is that we revoke, in line with the Director of Public Places authorisation then, to revoke the air quality management areas within our City Council area. And I'm happy to take questions. I would like to thank Tim Savage for a very technical report, and I understand we have Lewis Mould here this evening, who also introduced the papers when they came to Cabinet briefing previously. So happy to take questions. Otherwise, we'll move the recommendation, Chair.
Councillor Hyland.
Thank you, Chair. The council, in the report 1.5, it says the council must consider whether there is a likelihood of levels increasing in the forthcoming years before revoking an AQMA. With the introduction of the Army and Navy hamburger solution, the report suggests we can expect decreased levels of pollutants. Am I reading that correctly? Because it was a bit of a technical report. Does the removal of the AQMA come with a cost saving? If so, how much? If we fail to record, do we risk hidden harm to Chelmsford residents if we're removing these AQMAs? Because if there's no increase in the measured, because I noted in the report they said no increase in the measured areas, but if we're failing to measure, then is there a hidden risk? And the final point I think you started to make yourself there in your feedback was, how does this support or impact the Council's priority to reduce the impact of climate change on the city? A few questions, sorry.
You're getting your money's worth this evening, Councillor Hyland. Thank you. I will defer to Mr Mould for a couple of these points, but certainly I am absolutely on the same page as you regarding improving air quality and addressing the impacts of climate change, which is why we've got the comprehensive action plan that you can see and comes to overview and scrutiny each year to check our progress on that. I also know that we monitor in lots of areas in Chelmsford, and so I will defer to Mr Mould now, just to be sure that the monitoring is still going to be carried out in these areas, and we need to, just find some technical, some information for you from the specialist over here. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Hyland, the monitoring will continue, even though the AQMA will, if it is revoked, will no longer be there. We still have a duty under our air quality strategy to monitor the air and to ensure that we're doing all that we can. And if it did turn out that levels were found to be going up again, then obviously we would deal with that. But I think the general trend across the county is that levels are going down. I don't think anyone in Essex has revoked a AQMA yet, but there will be others that that do the same, because it's a trend because of the change of fleet. There's more electric cars, the diesel cars are more efficient now. It's just that's one of the main reasons why this is going ahead.
No cost saving.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. The other question was, unfortunately, there is no cost saving by removing these.
Okay, is the report agreed? Right.
Thank you.
Right, thank you. So moving on to item 9, Councillor Fuller on the travelling show people site.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this planning advice note is to support the local plan and also the planning obligations supplementary planning document as well. And it provides clarity in response to common questions that are asked and guidance on the design and layout of emerging travelling showperson sites. The adopted local plan has allocated 24 travelling showperson plots, and they're to be located within the strategic sites at West Chelmsford, North East Chelmsford, Great Lees, and north of Southwood and Ferrers. And this advice note seeks to ensure that these sites are delivered to the same high quality standard as would be expected in any other residential provision, that they are suitable to accommodate the lifestyle associated with the travelling showperson community, and that they're able to facilitate easy maintenance and management to ensure site sustainability and protect the health and well-being of residents. So this particular draft planning advice note was presented to the Chelmsford Policy Board on the 2nd of November last year, where it was approved to go out for a focused consultation to obtain the views of key stakeholders, including developers, parish councils, the County Council, and the Showman's Guild. That consultation ran for 4 weeks. 8 representations were received, in response to that consultation. And a feedback report is found in Appendix 2, and that summarises those representations and details that the Chelmsford City Council officers, how they responded to each in the form of comments and or proposed changes to the planning advice note. Positively, the majority of the responses were supportive of the draft advice note and its purpose. A track change version of the draft advice note is found at Appendix 3, and that shows where the proposed changes are to be made. The recommendation is for the approval of publication of this advice note in accordance with those changes, pending any subsequent minor textual, presentation or layout amendments to the final version. So I do make that recommendation.
Okay, any questions? He's going to keep quiet. Right, so is the report agreed?
Agreed.
Right. Okay, we're moving swiftly on. Item 10 is the budget. I'm going to hand over the chair for item 10 to Councillor Goldman so that I can present and she can chair, so I don't try to do 2 jobs at once. So.
Thank you very much, Chair. Okay, so this, as Councillor Robinson has just said, is the budget report. This is the big piece on the agenda today. I'm sure you're all very excited to be here for it and look forward to your questions. But first of all, I will ask Councillor Robinson to present, please.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So I want to start with a few thank yous. I mean, thank you to Phil Reeves and his team who've worked closely with me and Cabinet and managers to draw up the proposals, as they always do. Thank you to all of the budget holders right across the council who have done their level best to come up with proposals to save money so that we can balance the budget in ways that will affect service levels as little as possible. But I want to take this opportunity to say the biggest thank you to all the staff, every single person who works for Chelmsford City Council, wherever you work, whether in one of our operational sites or here in the Civic Centre, you play a key role in running vital services for the residents of our district. And I know that over the last few years it has been particularly challenging, and certainly in the last 2 years with inflation, meaning we haven't been able to pay as much as the inflation has gone up. So thank you to every one of those people that works for the residents of the district. And I am so proud to be the leader of this fantastic council because of those 1,100 or so staff that we employ who turn up to work every single day. And we've heard this evening on other meetings about how many of them go above and beyond what is expected of them. And we've talked about the housing crisis, but there are many other right across the council who they all do the best they can for our community, especially for some of our most vulnerable residents. 4 years ago, we presented the first Liberal Democrat budget for 16 years, and we thought that had presented us with a few challenges, but little did we know that just a few weeks later, lockdown and a global pandemic was just round the corner. So after that, our 2021 and 22 budgets were knocked off course because income to the council vanished during the lockdown period and took a long time to recover, and some of it, like car parking, will never recover to the pre-pandemic levels. Those were income streams that had taken many years, and to be fair to Councillor Whitehead and team, under his administration, those income streams, those new sources of income, had to be built up because of continuing falling support from central government over many years. And then after the recovering from the pandemic, we then had last year to deal with rampant inflation. Energy prices had doubled in just over a year. In fact, they tripled over a 3-year period, just over a 2-year period. From 2021, we were spending 1.3 million a year on energy to 3.7 million in the current year, and other costs rising by over 10%. And that was a huge shock to the system, not just this council, not just every other council, but businesses and families across the country, as we know. We just got so used to low inflation and low interest rates. Inflation had not risen over 3% for 30 years. And so this has been a huge shock to our collective systems. And indeed, it was last year that Mr. Evely observed in a members' briefing that preparing the budget was he said it had been the worst budget in his career. But little did he know, we had another one that was going to be even more challenging. So 2024-25 presents a whole load of more challenges. So that's the context for this budget. And more detail about that context is on pages 5 to 7 of the main report. So what are the changes that we are proposing? So this is on table 1. If you're looking at each individual report, it's page 8. But table 1, budget gap for the 2024 and forecast change from preceding years. So as you can see from that table, before the changes that we're proposing, we're facing a budget gap for the coming year compared to now of £7.555 million, mainly caused by the rising costs of homelessness at 3.7 million, general inflation at 1.73 million, and rising construction and capital costs at just under £1 million, plus a collection of mostly one-off items. So those are the challenges that set out at the top of table 1, and then the lower part of table 1 shows the changes that we are proposing to make to fill that gap from a combination of extra income from charges and council tax, spending reductions, reserves, using reserves, and hoping that the promised government support does actually come about. Leaders across the country of all parties have made it very clear that without more funding from central government, next year is the last time that we will be able to balance the finances of this council without making significant changes to services. Like every other local authority in the country, this council is tackling the most difficult budget position it has ever faced, leaving its financial position severely challenged. We've already touched on homelessness. The budget for homelessness costs has been set on the assumption that there'll be an increase of 464 as we were at the end of November to 620 by the end of March 2025. So more, I'll come back to that later on. So we are proposing a number of actions to address these challenges, and these are set out on page 9, and we will have to start looking at making those further changes as soon as this budget cycle is settled. It's worth taking a moment to, if we move on a bit, to government funding. Government support, or lack of it, has been much discussed in the media recently. So if we look at page 11, section 2 of the report, in particular the yellow section, government support for all councils has been falling dramatically since 2010. We used to get over £11 million a year in revenue support grants, and we now get 0. But they had to invent some new top-up grants so that they can say that we're not worse off. When we are, of course, worse off in real terms, but in cash terms, they're trying to say, well, we've got slightly more than last year. But across the country, between 2010 and 2022, real-term spending per head on cultural services was cut by 43%, on roads and transport by 40%, on housing by 35%, and on planning and development by 1/3, with more cuts penciled in for this year. If you look at the table 2, the yellow section sets out what support we do actually get from central government. Now, most people wouldn't think of business rates as being a grant because we collect business rates, but actually we don't keep it. We collect £82 million, and the government lets us keep 3.89 in the coming year. And then they have to top it up a bit because they're not increasing the rates that some businesses actually pay, so they're increasing the grant to make up for that shortfall. It's yet another complication to a complicated system. New homes bonus used to be given to us for 4 years, and then that was reduced to 3 years, 2 years, and now only 1 year. And yes, it's great. That's going up in the coming year from 940,000 to 1.6 million. But that doesn't really cover the extra costs of delivering services to those new houses for more than a couple of years. And then you see the service grant and the funding guarantee grant is actually going down. So they're actually reducing the amount of cash. So they give us some new homes bonus and then they take away more than half of it. So that's the total support that we get from the government. What you might call the basic grant, those last 2 lines, as you can see, is just 1.63 million compared to our total expenditure of 111 million, and down from 2.1 million just a year ago. But there has been some lobbying, a lot of lobbying by councils, and you may have seen the announcement on Thursday that the government was making available an extra £600 million for councils. Well, 500 million of that goes to social care, leaving 100 million for the other authorities. And our share of that, we estimate, will be £226,000. It's a help, but not much towards our £7.5 million shortfall. So I'm tabling an amendment to the report to take on board that extra 226k, which deletes the penultimate line in table 12 on page 20. So moving on through the report, page 13, I mentioned earlier a moment ago about grants which we hope will arise, but we don't know. Page 13 refers to the homelessness prevention grant. This has become an important part. Since 2017, we've had a statutory duty to prevent homelessness before it arises. So we get a government grant towards that, but they haven't actually confirmed what it will be. But we're making an assumption, and I hope that comes about. Housing and homelessness is such a huge challenge, both financially and socially, that there is a substantial section on this, pages 14 to 16. So if I can pause for breath and hand over to Councillor Foster just to take you through that section.
You can. Thank you. Well, I think it's the big elephant in the room, isn't it? The temporary accommodation. And I think the issue is put forward very succinctly, actually, in the introduction to the budget, because there are three things happening, actually. We're housing more homeless households from, in March 21, 243, November 23, 471. And you can see in the graphs number 5A, which shows the increase, 5A, and 5B, our assumptions for our working assumption, and we've taken 620 households by March 25 as the best sort of working assumption that we can. In addition to that, we've got the costs of temporary accommodation for each household has risen from 8,500 to 10.6 thousand in March 23, and for new cases, we're paying 13,000 per year in subsidy loss, or rather, we're not paying that. That is the amount of subsidy loss we have for each case, each household that we're assisting with accommodation at the moment, and we now have the lack of move on, so people are spending more time in temporary accommodation, which actually adds up to the perfect storm. But we at least recognise the problem. I'm not sure that every local authority has got to this point already. So what we're doing, well, as you can see, we're reviewing policies, and the policy that I brought to you today, the private rented sector policy, is one of those policies that we're reviewing. We will review the homelessness strategy and the tenancy strategy in the tenancy policy in 2024. The whole council is focused on this, on change and improvement. The Housing Action Group, which has brought people together from all departments in the council, has made recommendations, and there will be an action plan which will be followed throughout the next year. Dulac visited, they've made recommendations, and also recommendations for people, other local authorities for us to talk to, so that we can learn from each other. We're quite focused on that. We're doing all that we can to minimise costs and minimise length of stay, all that we can to prevent homelessness and getting through. The communication strategy, I'm sure people will have encountered both the leader of the council and the chief executive, either writing in various publications or making talks where they're getting the message out there. And we need to communicate to people, those that are threatened with homelessness, or perhaps families who might be thinking there's going to be family breakdown. You are not going to be able to go along and you go to the council and you will get what people would think of as a council house, which would be a housing association house. This is not going to happen. We need to get that message out there. We're working with our registered provider partners to look at maximising lettings, maximising building new homes, all of the things that I've talked about before. We're supporting initiatives to chain moves, downsizing, supporting initiatives like Chess, the new scheme, and we're building and encouraging building as much as possible. And I regret to say that I didn't mention Chelmsford Waterside in my answer to your question, Councillor Hyland, which I should have done, because of course that will provide lots of affordable homes. So what I can say is I think that we're making that prediction. I know that all staff, all of the officers will be working towards minimising that number, doing as much as we can, but we can all do our bit as well. And to echo what the Chief Executive said at the briefing the other day, some of the things that we need to happen and that we could all lobby for is we need the local housing allowance uprated, because that would give us an extra 800,000, and not all local authorities would need that. So You know, it wouldn't be as though it's blanket across the country. We want to not be grouped with Braintree and Malden, because it doesn't make sense for us to be grouped with Braintree and Malden, given that their rents are lower than ours. And we would want the government to fund the cost of asylum seekers who we have a duty, homeless duty to. So the budget is a prediction, but I am confident that we're doing, that it is only a prediction, and that we're doing all that we can to ensure that we minimise costs.
Right, thank you. So I think it's important to note that, as Councillor Foster said, that chart shows where we are pitching our best guess of where the homelessness numbers will be. But if it was wrong, if it was an underestimate by just 10 cases, that would be another £130,000 that we had to find. So moving on to other key issues. So other cost pressures that we face are set out in Table 8 on page 16 onwards. Quite a collection there of inflationary increases in energy and so on. I draw attention in particular to the minimum wage. The government announced that it will rise on the 1st of April. For over 21s, it's going to £11.44. That's a rise of 9.8%. For younger people, it will actually go up by 15%. Now, I'm all in favour of ensuring that the lowest paid in society get extra help with the rampant cost rises in the cost of living, but this affects 1/5 of our staff directly, others indirectly, and thousands more who work in the care sector. So a mandated rise of 10% when council tax is only allowed to rise by 3% and government funding by slightly more is clearly a challenge. And there's also more in that pages about energy costs and other staff pressures. Page 19 covers a number of one-off items, most of which we are covering from reserves. Page 20 explains the other changes which we are making to balance the budget from extra income and reduced spending. The reduced spending is about £1 million. It's perhaps worth noting at this point that this is the 5th year that we have removed substantial sums from existing budgets. For the coming year, it's 1 million. Last year, it was just over 1.5 million. The year before, nearly 1 million. Before that, 2 million. And before that, before COVID, that was a long time ago, 500,000. So that's 6 million that we have removed from the base budget since we came into administration of the council. Pages 20 on and subsequent describe service improvements that we are able to propose. Because although the revenue cash budget is under severe pressure, the capital or investment programme remains ambitious in support of our aim for a greener, fairer and more connected Chelmsford. Money for capital investment is much easier to come by than for the revenue side of things. So we will continue to plant 1 tree for every resident of Chelmsford, build 58 genuinely affordable family homes, which have recently got planning permission. We'll support more families who are homeless, including, as Councillor Foster alluded to, 24 modular units for single homeless people, which we'll build with Chess, upgrade the floodlights at Chelmsford Park, modernise the pool heating at Southwood and Ferrers, improve facilities at the museum and the indoor market and children's play areas, and refurbish 2 key city centre car parks. Upgrade office blocks that we own in order to generate more rent in future, and the lighting at the Highland Stables car park. So there are a number of good news items in this budget. New projects which we are able to start and others which we can continue with, which were approved before. These proposals are on pages 21 to 24, and each project is described in some detail on pages 25 to 29. Pages 30 to 34 cover the funding of the capital programme, including the revenue costs. We are deferring a number of schemes and deleting a few others in order to reduce the impact on the revenue budget. It's worth perhaps taking a moment to talk about the cost of the capital programme. At the moment, on external debt, we have virtually none. Neighbouring authorities, we have £6 per head, and that's a very small amount. Brentwood and Uttlesford, for example, have over 2,000 per head of population. even with these proposed additions to capital spending, in 3 years' time, and the programme which we are approving, we will still have significantly less debt than the district average. The Office for Local Government compares debt to core spending power, and our debt is currently 1.6 times core spending power. By March 2027, we will be 3.3 times core spending power. But the English district average is 5 times core spending power. So we will, even with these increases, be significantly below the English district average. At the other end of the scale, Runnymede is 73 times core spending power, Spelthorne is 93 times, and Woking is 146 times, all of which were under the Conservatives. We are not taking a risk with this capital programme. We have reduced some of it and embarking on important additions to our projects going forwards. Pages 35 to 39 give a forward look for the overall revenue budget and the impact on reserves. We will maintain reserves slightly above the level recommended by the Chief Finance Officer, and this will help us cope with any unexpected shocks that might occur, such as another energy price rise. Section 8 of this report isn't my report, it's from our CFO, and in his professional opinion, as you'll see at the end, the budget is robust and sustainable. Section 9, pages 47 to 49 will be filled out before the council meeting. Pages 50 to 55 are the budget broken down by department, and page 56 onwards covers the whole capital budget, including the things that we previously agreed, and details the deferrals that we are proposing. And that is it. I'm sure you'll have some questions.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. I understand that Councillor Steele had a pre-written question, so I'm going to go to Councillor Steele first and then take questions afterwards.
Thank you. Yes, my question is about the 4 million Chelmsford City Council contribution to the Army and Navy roundabout development. I note it's been removed from the 24-25 budget. The project, mainly funded by County Council, is currently in the application stage, along with other key developments for Chelmsford funded by ECC, such as the North East Bypass and new station. So it represents a significant benefit to the residents of Chelmsford. I've been informed that the City's Council's contribution will be removed from the proposed budget, but remains in the aspirational budget. Whilst I understand that City Council may have a view on the probability of the funds being required within the next 12 months, it does concern me that a lack of firm commitment to our contribution could undermine the whole project. Would the leader please confirm their commitment to this project and to the City Council's 4 million contribution as and when it is needed?
Thank you very much. I mean, I think that your last point is the very last words that you used, as and when it's needed, is the important thing. Because if we'd actually put it into the capital programme, we have to fund it, we have to add the finance and the revenue budget. And as you know, for every million, you have to allocate nearly 10% into the revenue budget. So that'd be 400k potentially added to the revenue budget. And we don't know exactly when it's going to be, so it seems a little unwise to put something effectively into our revenue budget when we don't actually know when it's going to be required. The County Council has quite a long way to go. It's got to get planning permission and then go back to Department for Transport to get a full business case, and then go out to tender. And our £4 million is only needed once the construction is about to start. Because it's a very small part of the total budget, and so it's when it's going to be would be required is beyond our 3-year medium-term financial plan. So we don't want to make that commitment if we made a commitment today, then we'd have to fund it from the revenue budget. So we will just make the decision at the time when it's needed.
Okay, so the question was, are City Council committed to it as and when it's needed, which I'm not sure you've quite answered. You've said you're kind of deferring it to a future decision. That doesn't sound like a commitment. So are you not committing to it as and when it's needed, or are you saying you're only committed to making a decision at some later date?
The problem is it's slightly hypothetical because it's not needed for 3 years. If we made an actual decision today, we'd have to put it in the revenue budget, and the revenue budget is under so much pressure. I'm not willing to put an extra 400k into the revenue budget for something we won't be needed in the next 2 years. So it's simple as that, really. It's a question of timing. We're not making the decision today. When the county council comes back and says this project is now going ahead, then we can make the decision at that point, and then we will put it in the revenue budget. But we will have to make that provision at that time, and hopefully we're all hoping that the outlook for local government might get better next year.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Councillor Whitehead.
I mean, as you know, we don't sort of go through it in detail now. We save it all up for full council meeting. And from that point of view, I'm not going to go through pages and pages as and when they come up. I mean, we understand the problem. It's a frustration for every council of every political phase at the moment, really. And it's depressing, really. We can't blame you for all the things that are in this budget that are wrong, because it's not your fault. And I'm happy to say that. There are things that should be done by government, and our MPs are chasing it up, as you know, really, and working very hard to try to get it improved. The one particularly on homeless and stuff is beyond my comprehension that we can't get that sorted out centrally, because we can't sort it out. I mean, Lynn and all the team are doing bits, but you're all tinkering at the edges while people queue up and want to get places, really, and that's the depressing part of all of this. So that the revenue side of the budget, you're doing the sort of things that, as you say, we did and you've done, and some budget reductions is one of those cunning phrases. Of course, it sometimes means increases in income rather than anything else. But we all understand that too. So I'm not, as I say, criticising that either. You've mentioned in that particular page fees and charges are being put up because they can be dealt with separately, as it were, but we've got car parks going up by 9.6 and leisure income increasing as well. Will there be details of that so that residents will say a car park is going up by X and Y in the way that we normally do that, which is not put into this particular budget?
Councillor Robinson.
Yeah. A year ago, we amended standing orders so that the delegation to officers, the limit was increased. In the past, it was anything that had a change of more than 250k, and that was increased in line with the delegation on spending. The delegation on income was also increased to £1 million, but it has to be reported. So the short answer is no, although we could make that detail available to you if you wanted. It doesn't no longer, under our standing orders, has to be published in detail. We have spent, in particular, Councillor Fuller and the team in the parking team have spent a lot of time looking at which car parks they feel could bear increases. The ones that are popular could bear a larger increase than the less popular car parks, and so on, which is why it's stated, and the same with leisure, which is why it's stated as a sort of a varying percentage. Some charges which we feel could bear the higher charge will go up by a higher percentage. I mean, none of us like increasing those particularly on the leisure side, but one of the biggest increasing costs have been in our leisure centres, because last year we had to find over £1 million extra just to heat the swimming pool. And so it's necessary that users of the leisure centre pay an extra contribution towards those increased costs. Car parking does vary between short stay and long stay. One of the things that's mentioned in the report in table 10, part of the increase is from price changes, but another part of the increase is actually more customers. So we have actually seen in the last couple of months an uptick in parking numbers of cars parking, which is why we're budgeting an extra £362,000 for that. And as I mentioned in the capital programme, we are repairing the multi-storey car park to ensure that it continues to be a good service available for shopping.
The only reason I mention it is because the press love these stories, as you know, which is probably why you don't want to publish them. But nonetheless, I mean, they'll still come on to us and say, what do you think about X going up by whatever it happens to be. So you probably need to be ready for that, I guess, because that's always their favourite sort of headline. It goes up 10 pence and the world has ended. I mean, I understand that. Again, that's something to be prepared for. I won't talk about capital at all, really, otherwise I'll get onto my favourite subject, which I won't keep going with, and we'll save that up for a future meeting. But yeah, as I say, we understand that. We're not going to go through pages and pages. We're not going to blame anybody, and we are happy in most cases, I think, to accept that what you're trying to do is for the benefit of the residents. So I can't say more than that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. I just, if I may abuse my position as temporary chair briefly, because seeing as Councillor Whitehead raised an issue, that I'd just like to make a broader point that I personally have been quite shocked and astounded over the last few years by how little central government, and including civil servants, understand how local government finances work. To the extent that we've had visits from DLUC who've come in here and simply not understood how local government finances work. And we have had to explain it to them. And I think that is absolutely shocking, especially when they are making funding decisions about local government, based on a misunderstanding of how the whole system works. And I think that is, if one thing were to change, other than providing more money to local government, it would be simply having an understanding of how it works, because it is not how many of them envisage its work. And I've also seen a report in the news today that central government there's a suggestion that they are going to tell councils to sell off their assets to fix their revenue problems. That is selling off the family silver. And it means that you can only sell it off once, and once that money is gone, it is gone, and that would be certainly to the detriment of all of the residents of Chelmsford, let alone further afield and across the entire country. So I just wanted to set that on the record, because I was really shocked by how little they understand how local government finance works.
I can only say I entirely agree, and planning particularly. It's my favourite subject when I ever meet any of them, really. None of them understand planning. It's very depressing. And local government finance too. And what you're saying about selling off the family silver, I spent years in banks stopping people selling off the factory to keep their losses going. It never works, because the factory then closes the following year. And yeah, it is depressing, really, that the level of understanding of finance amongst, well, residents, we understand it's much more complicated, but every time they change the name of the department, which is annually, isn't it now, then they appear to get another load of civil servants who don't understand it, really. And from that point of view, that's why I've said, we're not being political on the subject. We agree that if only people understood what was happening, it would make life a lot easier for us all. In the interim, we will plough on.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Are there any other questions? Councillor Hyland.
I've already asked the question of Phil about the creative accounting with the 4 million, so I won't dwell on that one. In table 26 and 27, there is a series of homeless pots of money, 17, 18, 20 and 21, that have been moved to 22. Again, the officer was able to tell me the reasons why, but the question I really wanted to understand is, does it, by moving it into this pot, does it remove the spend from specific actions that we as members have voted for into a now unspecified spend to be determined by officers? Is there like a juggling of funds into a different care of hands?
Councillor Robinson.
Yes. The short answer is no. I think you're referring to the what we were just talking about a moment ago as the aspirational capital programme. Is that what you mean? Yeah. So as I said in answer to Councillor Steele, if we agreed today that we're definitely going to spend something in 2 years' time, we have to provide for it in the revenue budget, which is why we're creating that aspirational list. What was so?
No, I skipped by that.
Okay.
That question has been answered already. So
yeah.
I was talking about the homeless pots on tables 26 and 27. There's a series of.
Oh right. Sorry. Yes. We've grouped. Yeah. Sorry. We've just rolled them in. There were 4 separate budgets, and I must admit I'm not entirely sure why we created 4. One was there from a longer time ago, and we've just added 4 it's just collapsed 4 lines into one, really. The amount of money is still the same or very similar. And as Councillor Foster was saying earlier, there's still an awful lot of projects that we want to crack on with. And building the 58 homes and the chess project are just 2 examples that will come out of that.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. I think Mr. Reeves would like to come in.
Yeah, you asked about it in an email. I wasn't sure if it was a confidential matter or not, but basically it is a way of making it clear to members how much you're spending on housing. There is a delegation in place against each of those items. Those delegations would remain in line with the pots. It's just bringing it all together so we can be very clear about the overall investment. Clearly, if there were going to be changes to it, there would be approval mechanisms. But it is about tackling this issue in a way that delivers the most effective solution in terms of getting our costs down, but also helping people. So fundamentally, those pots are being brought together to provide that clarity about the sheer investment that's available. But it will be self-financing, it will deliver.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rees. Anyone else? Nope. Okay, so I think that's to recommend that to go to council.
So yes, the recommendations in section 1, that's little 1 to little 8, should be proposed to council, including the amendment that I moved earlier to table 12 on page 20, and that we agree recommendations 2.1 and 2.2.
Is that agreed? Thank you. Thank you very much. So moving on to item 10.2 on the agenda, which is the Capital Treasury Management and Investment Strategy. And again, this is a report by the Leader of the Council, so Councillor Robinson.
So yeah, this is a supporting paper that is a statutory requirement that we have to table in support of the revenue budget that we just agreed to recommend to council. There's 3: capital strategy, treasury management strategy, and investment strategy. And these are annual reports, as I say, which is the government requires us to produce. The treasury management and investment strategy has already been to the Treasury Management and Investment Committee in December, and were agreed and will go to council. The treasury strategy is similar as it has been for a while, and it recognises that the council is likely to start borrowing externally, but as I explained earlier, that's nothing to be worried about. The borrowing and investment projections arise from the proposals that we've just agreed for the capital programme, and this strategy just deals with the practicalities around the borrowing that follows. The report shows an updated interest rate, interest earnings and borrowing forecasts, which are also covered in the capital strategy and the budget report. Fingers crossed that interest rates will fall. If they do, that will reduce our borrowing costs, but it will also reduce the returns we make from any cash and investments. The investment strategy, which covers non-treasury investments, the tables have been updated for the assumptions in the budget that we've just agreed. There aren't any other material changes, and as we always have to say, we don't purchase investment properties for the primary purpose of yield, in order that we can keep borrowing from the Public Works Loan Board if we need to. The capital strategy is mostly the same as 2023-24, but with updated tables to reflect the decisions that we just made in the budget, and we discussed the aspirational schemes, where affordability is still being resolved. And there would then be a further approval for any of those to go ahead. And as I said, a lot of this is designed to reflect the priorities that we've set out in our Chelmsford plan, which we agreed at December Council, to create a greener, fairer, more connected Chelmsford. So, and as we were just saying, those reports go to Council.
Yeah, 6.1, 6.2, 10.1 and 10.2.
Right. Well, that's it at 8:09. Thank you very much.